because of a revulsion felt by the people in the aggressor nations. The old appeals to racial, sexual, and religious chauvinism and to rabid nationalist fervor are beginning not to work. A new consciousness is developing which sees the Earth as a single organism and recognizes that an organism at war with itself is doomed. We are one planet.
Hey, Dogadas, how's it going?
Hey, good.
Good.
How are you?
Good. You know, we kind of mentioned it earlier, but I was just wondering from, because you're the one who brought it up in group about, what was it, in Gravity, they're doing the psychological, like, research paper?
Yeah. So it seems like there's a group of students and they were kind of like, they'd had like a month's worth of meetings, like, okay, we're going to do this thing, like, sort of like they were still in school. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
And like didn't really consult with anybody else in the TEC. They're like, okay, we're doing this psychological research project. And I was like, oh, you guys should probably, check out what we're doing in Omega and and all this stuff. Like, we've gone a long way down this, psychology thing. But the question, I think originally it was opened up to, to have some kind of, as part of the Gravity group, you hear a lot about, people's sort of mental health. Do you know what I mean? So, I think there was some, idea about that. But I will say that Aloysius and myself have been talking about, like, making like a caring DAO where we could, deal with just the fact that, there's an awful lot of people who are feeling an awful lot of stress, not only because of, Web3 and all the busyness and the newness of that, but also just, COVID and generally mental health just being ignored by pretty much everybody, right?
Yeah.
And so, so there's all these sort of parallel discussions, I think, which are taking place, and it would be good to. So I didn't know if they were talking about parallel or psychology in terms of the overall Web3 space, or they were talking about psychology and the cryptocurrency flower, or do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I gave them some of the Omega resources and tried to, give them an idea that. But I think a lot of times when people show up here, we automatically assume that there's some kind of alignment, But I think, the more I listened to them, the more I realized, oh, these guys really aren't in alignment and probably, could be.
Yeah.
Right. So.
Yeah, and I was thinking in one of the onboarding thread, it's like, because we had on the Figma board and Soul Sisters,
right,
like dividing it kind of process, energy, and then creative. And really, I was seeing it as like, okay, there's the process side where we could try to like onboard them that way, and say, hey, this is what we're doing. Your stuff kind of fits here. You might want to come to group. And then I was also thinking like this one is like more free flow where they could come in and like would just ask them like, oh, what you guys are doing over there, and just like see like if they vibe, and then like try to be like, okay, we're trying to do this, and I think where we're at is trying to start to put some of this stuff like on like D-Work to like fill out the library where
Sure.
Yeah. And so like once they
Sure. Well, I was just noticing they were going a long time down a particular rabbit hole without understanding that we'd been down that way for quite a while.
Yeah.
So, I just wanted to make sure they knew that there were people around who could
later
help them. Or
that's like my idea with what I'm calling roughly the NFT self-discovery game. It's like us keeping that stuff and then like having it. I don't even want it to be a bot, but I'm sure they're gonna make it into a bot. But but it's like this helpful bot that'd be like, oh, you guys are doing, broadly speaking, psychological work. Oh, this is what stuff has been done already around here, and this is where like they usually do that kind of stuff in this thread or that thread, and this is the type of stuff they're
Mhm.
talking about over there. Because we're all siloed, even in tech. Like I don't go much outside of Omega.
Right.
Yeah, because I just like the overview
Well, yeah.
spot.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love that too. It's just that I also participate in all these other things,
Yeah.
and I've been here a long time, so
Yeah.
it's I did want to. Yeah. It's it's also true that I have a bit of a bug in my butt about the sort of lack of perspective that
Yeah.
a lot of people show in this space. Do you know what I mean? So I have a whole thing I've developed about, are you a cryptocurrency DAO? Like, I don't know if you've seen that, but
Yeah.
you're probably not a cryptocurrency DAO. You don't just get to show up and be like, we're a DAO. There's certain requirements and things about that. So like there's certain aspects that you have to kind of, you don't get to just say you're decentralized and autonomous when in fact your behavior is more like a semi-centralized bureaucracy.
Yeah.
So I don't know. This is, so part of my thing is to, I don't know if you've seen the graphics that I've made recently about this. I was gonna make a Medium post about it, but
Oh, yeah.
so there's this,
Uh-huh.
and the reason why I'm saying that is I think that if you look at what Satoshi's done, he created a technology, but clearly there was a practical philosophy under it because he wouldn't have been able to create the technology without that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So he needed to have some technology, but then he also needed a certain amount of humility. And I feel like, like the extractive, abusive, economy, just, okay, we can create all kinds of technology and just use it as a weapon against, people who don't know what they're doing or whatever. And then,
Hey, you can always use my projects as like anti to all that, like really scaling and putting like
Right.
individual. Hey, come on, you make one. It's
Right.
like not about money or something. It's about
exactly.
how you put yourself out there,
Yeah.
like how you define
Right.
yourself and
Yeah, and so the whole idea is I wanted to give this sort of large perspective on, like, okay, we don't get to just skip over step 2. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the reason why I was attracted to the token engineering commons because I thought they weren't doing that, but there are some ways in which we are doing that. we are doing this, and we're also skipping some of those things too, right? And so I'm just trying to make sure that we're actually living up to the idea of the DAO, and then later on, once decentralization is everyone's ground feeling about everything, then we can become deliberately developmental in the more meta-modern sense. So anyway, so that's just kind of my latest thing here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What was
It
that?
was
Jim?
great.
Oh yeah. And I think
I'm sorry?
It was great. That
Oh.
I feel so relieved when I just see a document like this one. So it's like some air.
yeah.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, my whole thing is to just keep, trying to help, people understand that they need to keep, developing themselves, and, you have to start with yourself, right? It's an inside-out process.
Yeah.
If it becomes an outside-in process, then that's literally the description of, narcissism, right? So that becomes abusive and extractive and so on. So, we have to have systems that reward, rewards people behaving in the way that we want them to, which is, the inside-out thing. So, but I can't really participate in the reward systems thing because it's just so broken in my mind that I feel like my voice is screaming in the void there,
how would you design something like?
Well, it has to be based on gratitude, right?
yeah.
Yeah,
So,
like it's your,
It has to be, and it actually has to be appropriate. So I work with Sebnem, and she, with the Dada group, actually created a created a beautiful document, which I actually wish we would use as a basis for this stuff, and I'll find it in a second here. I'm just looking for it. Yeah, here we go. So this is Sebnem saying, and what I basically did was I basically said there are in Hinduism there's these eight different kinds of wealth, right? There's inner wealth, there's impact wealth, there's social wealth, circle of genius, economic wealth, health wealth, career wealth, and adventure wealth, right? And so the question is that are we doing a service to people by reducing all of these different kinds of wealth down to a single kind of token? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's kind of my question, and I don't think that we are, because if we were to call out these things, we could, well, first of all, it would give us more detailed metrics. Do you know what I mean? So if we were to be like, I've got a person over here who's helping people stay healthy, let's say, with this caring DAO, right? So then there would be a kind of health wealth situation that's going on, right? And and then there'd be this kind of adventure wealth. So let's say someone's really good at opening people up to new things, right? Or whatever. That would be a part of a, adventure wealth. Impact wealth would be like, like what I just did, right? It's going to have an impact on those people who are dealing with this psychological research project to work inside of the group, as opposed to coming up with it based on their training as or I should say, kind of indoctrination into the colonized way of thinking, which happens in colleges. Do you know what I mean? So there's just all these different ways, and part of the reason why I like to participate in groups like this is because there's just a real circle of genius here. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I just like participating in groups where there are a lot of really smart people doing a lot of really cool things, and so we should be able to reward people and praise people and be able to express gratitude to people in all of these different ways, considering all these different kinds of things in this Ikigai. So,
hey, Durgadas, I
Yeah.
got a good flow for you. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
yep.
Okay. Have you been into the Figma board lately?
Nope.
Okay.
I've been off for a month, so and I'm not really here either. I'm just kind of
Yeah.
I'm still a little bit needing some time, but which Figma board are you referring to here?
I'm gonna try to share my screen, but it's the one that everybody's been jamming in lately. It's
Okay. Well,
the Omega
Yeah, I wouldn't-
Omega Energies and Initiatives board. But there's a good little bit down in there that I've been playing
Yeah.
with about circular economy and
Yep.
drawing an analogy to the Amazon River and how that system is like, it's a constant rearranging of fungibility. Say, like, if we just take the rain, for instance, it's flowing down that river and it gets to the ocean, and then it lifts up and it goes all the way back to the mountains and it drops again. And the ground zone might be like your non-fungibility zone, where there's all this teeming life that pops up and it's diverse and it's got all these different expressions and ways,
Sure.
right?
Absolutely.
But as it gets to the ocean, it goes back into that cycle of, fungibility, where it's either silt that's spreading around the earth and the ocean, or it's rain that's lifting up into the air and it's air that's escaping, right? And it goes right back into the fungibility, or the fungibility zone. So the reason I just thought about all that was because of what you were saying about, everything meshing into one token, and obviously that's never going to be. But that one token, whatever one it is, will basically be whatever one provides the most fungibility for the most diverse set of non-fungibility. And an example might be like the Amazon system, but there's other systems like that too, And I've been playing with that idea that there's always going to be that flow. That's the
Well, I
circular-
would agree with you if we had constructed. See, I guess what I'm saying is a little bit beyond what I'm saying directly here. Do you know what a computational neural network is?
Yeah, in general. Yeah. Maybe not specifically, but
Here, let me
What do you
open up
got?
another graph. Let me open up another graphic here and see if I can. So this is just one example. One thing that I was doing was to, if you can ignore the Ostrom's principles things, let's just say I've got a set of quadrants, right, that I'm doing operations on, and I want to see. My idea here was that I could evaluate, let's say, Ostrom's principles, and I could stack them all up, and I could say, how well is our DAO doing at boundaries? How well are we dealing with local circumstances and participatory decision making and monitoring and graduated sanctions, and roll that whole thing up into a number, right? That number represents the total of, so you would do a totalizing thing on each one of these. So each of these individual sections would have its own methodology, right? So you would have a score for boundaries, and that would roll up, and then you would roll all that up into kind of a larger score for how we're doing in terms of Ostrom's principles. You could do the same thing in terms of rewarding somebody by the end, but I would want to make sure that there is something underneath all of that, right? That I'm not just sitting there going, oh, now I've got a token, yay. Do you know what I'm saying? Or I have X more tokens than Billy Joe Jim Bob. And so, there's a kind of, and I would like to be able to say that the reason why this is, let's say I replace all of these with my contributions in the 8 forms of wealth, right? So adventure wealth, social wealth, and different kinds of things. And you could see then that a person was contributing according to whatever it is that they're doing. And you could say, well, wow, this person contributed in all these different areas, and that's why they have more tokens, right? But right now, all we know is that one person has more tokens than another person, or that one person is getting more praise than another person. It's just a flatland kind of thing, and I can't then reward somebody or praise them or have gratitude toward them because I don't know the way in which they've contributed. Do you know what I mean? So because I've dropped out of the reward system, maybe they're doing something like this, but I doubt it. Anyway, so you asked me the question, and that was kind of my answer. So I just wanted to give you that.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting, man. That was way deeper than I've ever gone into neural networks. But the general answer I really appreciate. Let me let that soak in for a minute. That's heavy.
Sorry, I'm always dragging
You're
people
always
from
good
the
for
front.
that rich stuff. There,
I'm always got another place for you to move toward, So sorry about
That's
that.
right. I appreciate it.
That's kind of my thing.
When you say you cannot reward someone or something because you don't know, in terms of gratitude, that it means that you know what you feel in terms of gratitude, but you don't know where it comes from. Or can you explain me a bit again, please?
So I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about, right? So let's say that I've got this. I'm just using this as an example, right? If we can, so I've got this feelings wheel, right? So
Feelings wheel. It's about feelings.
So I'm just using this as a way of explaining the layers of abstraction that I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
So a person's competence at dealing with token engineering commons in numerous ways initially may be limited to being able to explain themselves in terms of very simple kinds of things. And as they get better, and as depending on their competence, right? Somebody like, YGG Anderson, if you replace happy with, token engineering, that guy's going to be way out here with a really clear, giant amount of different kinds of things that they can contribute to the token engineering part of this thing. So if I was to not use these things, but replace these things with the cryptocurrency flower, which is why I chose this particular graphic, because it has similar colors. So if I'm saying that I've got a person who's contributing to the one aspect of the cryptocurrency flower, but they're doing it at at a different kind of level, right? Where I can then break this out and understand what's going on, right? I would like to be able to do that, and then at the end I may roll everything back up to the thing in the middle, which is a token. You get so many tokens for this reason. But I would also, the thing about this is that I could do a lot of things in terms of figuring out what's going on in the community. So if I've got people who are expressing feelings or needs or gratitude for a reward system, or anger or fear or disgust, to make sure that we can get to a person like that so gravity can do its work better, then we would just have a clearer sense of what's going on, and we would have a lot more signal, because we would have a lot more ways of describing and listening to the same set of signals, and so that would then mean that if I was going to do a reward system, I would have a very clear and very easy to understand reward system, but one that actually has the resolution that we need to sort of deal with that at the appropriate level. And we would have the ability to figure out signal to noise in terms of people's dissatisfaction, or where the community's not doing well, or things like this. Do you know what I mean?
But this kind of flower, it's mapping mostly emotions.
Yeah, I was just using that as a graphic, and if you just take the emotions out of it, and you could insert layers of understanding. So I'll give you an example. The Omega group just by itself is operating on the outside of that graphic that I showed you, right? Because we just have a lot of really smart people who are thinking really, really deeply, and have a really, there are a lot more options for a person to talk about how they're happy in the Omega group than there would be in a DAO that doesn't care about that. Do you know what I'm saying? So I'm just talking about layers of abstraction, so because of the layers of expertise, the fact that we have a gravity group reveals that there is some more wisdom in the token engineering commons that you wouldn't necessarily get in another place. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. No. I'm asking you. I mean, yes. I'm asking you that because so there's something I started to look at, and I really think that this is so important. It's the question of relation.
Yeah.
And understanding really what relation means, and that could be really a way to I don't know if it
totally
is right, but at least to highlight, what would work well or not. And in relation, you also have the relationship to yourself, because not everybody knows that if they are happy or angry or dissatisfied.
Exactly. That's right.
So
we should be able to validate it, though. So if I tell you that I have a very particular emotion, and I can describe it at length and write poetry about it and stuff like that, that's great, but it's still just happiness. Do you know what I'm saying? And a person who can describe it at just, I don't know, I just feel good, or I just feel bad, should be as acknowledged and dealt with, by the systems that we're creating as somebody who can write a sonnet about it. Do you know what I mean? But at least you'll have ability to talk to people about that from the level where they're coming from, right?
But also you have a cultural context, like
right,
the way
exactly.
you feel, and depending on your culture, etc. But
absolutely.
I mean, so I will try to, I started, I remember I shared, but maybe he's not here, but I shared it with Sebnem, but I really feel that there's something more to explore, this, all this way of, for the token ethics, that we should disrupt the way we are looking at it from the old world. This is why I feel that this relation and this philosopher, I don't know if you heard about him, Glissant. he's a French from Martinique philosopher. I mean, really, I think his philosophy, and it's growing, and you have a center on him in New York now and everything. He died 10 years ago. I think that's definitely the way, so helpful to understand what we try to do with decentralization.
Yeah. If you see this thing again, and anyway, I'm always the guy who just sort of shows up and tries to blow people's minds and then let them go do their thing.
Anyway,
So you see, you see, there's some things here where we're like, we don't need to measure some of these things, but you need to make them visible, right? So some things you want to reward, but the most important thing, and this is where it comes down to the ethical thing, anytime you reward or anytime you punish somebody, you're manipulating behavior, and you have to consider the ethical consequence of that, right? Every reward is an attempt to manipulate behavior.
Yeah.
Every punishment is an attempt to manipulate behavior. Full stop. There are no exceptions. That's just the way it is. That's just the nature of reality.
But this is why reward? Why reward?
Exactly.
Can I push on that a little?
Go ahead.
What I'm really wondering about here is there's a couple of places on Earth that I've been. It's real magical. It doesn't exist all the time. But it's spontaneous acts of kindness, not the ones that are for something. And I guess we could always like wonder, well, what is that person from deep inside that person's soul? Are they, trying to get back some kind of karmic mess up, or are they trying to put one forward? Like, who could ever tell? But let's just say you yourself could remember a time when, I don't know, you left a Coke there and you had no attachment as to who got it or why they got it, but you did want somebody to get it, and that's it. That was so maybe that's a motive, and maybe it comes in layers.
Well, my suggestion to people,
it doesn't happen at all.
My suggestion to people regarding this rewards and punishment thing is to read Alfie Kohn's book called Punished by Rewards. And I guess what I'm saying is that I have a kind of an architecture of some of these things. Like you might notice that one of the main things that I put in the inside of the at the very top, you see where it says what a culture educates is what it becomes, right? Now, if you think about that as a principle, okay, then you want to think, okay, in what way am I educating people? Almost always, we're educating people using rewards and punishments. And Alfie Kohn's book is an encyclopedic takedown of why, this is all about education, right? Instead of plans, praise, other bribes. This is about raising children, but also managing workers, right? Do this and you'll get that. And then, so it's hundreds of studies. This is deeply scientific, and so, but when I talk to the rewards group, it's all about no one's rewarding people in the way that we are, and people who are doing work, they should get their, sure they should, but they don't. That's not a reward. I think people have mistaken a reward for paying people for contributing to the commons because they're human beings, right? Like you can just go back to a poet like Gibran on giving, Then said a rich man, speak to us of giving. You give but little when you give of your possessions. It is when you give of yourself that you truly give. So that answers your question, Jolly, in terms of, that's, for what are your possessions but things you keep and guard for fear you may need them tomorrow? And tomorrow, what shall tomorrow bring to the overprudent dog bearing bones in the trackless sand as he follows the pilgrims of the holy city? I love that. What is fear of need but need itself? Is not dread of thirst when your well is full, the thirst it is unquenchable? This is the way, the extractive economy works, right? You just
Which way?
hoard
I
everything.
cannot-
Actually, money creates some
It's
some
it's hoarding,
abstraction.
yeah.
Like
Yeah,
people
yeah.
don't expose or feel like not needing to the others' needs. Actually,
Right.
like what I need, I don't write here and there. It's like
Right.
a bit shyness, maybe. Yeah, also creating some complexity there, but
And this
it's
right here
better
says it.
to- Yeah.
This right here says it. There are those who give little of the much which they have, and they give it for recognition, and their hidden desire makes their gifts unwholesome. That's precisely the thing I'm talking about, right? We created a whole, reward system. And there are those who have little and give it all. These are the beliefs in life and the bounty of life. And so what I'm saying is the basis of our reward system should be roughly like that of a basic income setup, and then above and beyond that, then you have these additional forms of wealth. All you have shall someday be given. Therefore, give now, that the season of giving may be yours and not your inheritors. Right? So, I mean, you can take like principles straight out of a book like The Prophet, and read, like, there's one section you often say, "I would give, but only to the deserving." The trees in your orchard say not so, nor the flocks in your pasture. They give that they may live, for to its old is to perish. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is so when you have a reward system, you're basically saying here's someone that deserves a thing, but it doesn't make any sense in terms of And then at the end, he's this part I love. He who is deserved to drink from the ocean of life deserves to fill his cup from your little stream. That's the comments right there. That's Eleanor Ostrom. I mean, you can just, it doesn't take a genius to see this stuff, but I don't know why it's true. But we don't. I don't know what it is when we're doing reward systems. We don't think about things like this, and so I like to make these kinds of connections. So if you want to give somebody something, what is the way in which you're giving? So that's all I'm saying.
I'm 100% against reward, 100%. And this, to me, it sounds, maybe I'm wrong, but it's very American, Anglo-Saxon culture, of this idea of seeking for some kind of authenticity. I mean, I think the most important is that how, you have some justice and equity, within a society, that what we should, fight for. And also this reward thing is so connected to market culture, I feel.
Yeah.
And I feel we need to disrupt more. So I will try to make I started this board on this relationship something. I will try to make it a bit more clear and share it with you for discussion if you want for another time. I put it somewhere.
Just look at the profit on giving and see what you can break out from that in terms of what it is that we can, because I could do that. I just haven't, I live with this stuff in my head all the time, and I'm trying to, give it out to other people. But the fact is just that this is my favorite thing. I keep it here all the time. Swamiji used to say, "Who are you to set right the world? You have to first rectify yourself in your own mind. When the mind becomes right, then everything will appear all right. Look within yourself."
The mind is never right. It's never right. You try to make it right.
That's right. Exactly. But you have to be able to do it without doership, right? I have to be able to come and say and blow people's minds and shift their perspective and think about things and then walk on my merry way and whistle the whole time. And if I care too much about it, then I step away. That's why when I stepped away a month ago, because I was caring too much. I was too attached to things and I didn't want, so I just have to be able to come here. Hope that you guys are in line with what I'm talking about and I have this, thing in your mind that you want to change internally. You don't necessarily want to change the system because the system can't change unless you change internally, because you won't then know what the delta is between those two things, right? And so my role here is to constantly try to coach people toward this improvement of themselves, and then to have us then get together and say, you know what, I realize this thing about, you know, the nature of this, and I have to, but if you can't penetrate the thing, and you're just like, we got to reward people and we're going to reward them, then you're just doing violence to some future version of of the culture that will have to. Do you know that there are lawyers even now? There's a whole class of lawyers whose only job is to try to overturn laws from hundreds of years ago.
Yeah.
That's their only job, is because they're brutalizing and violent to other people in ways that modern society could not have predicted, but they're still on the books, they're still hurting people, and they're still used as a pretext for violence toward people. I don't want to set up systems, and I don't want any on my watch to have people who I know set up systems that will then do violence to people either now or in the future.
Yeah.
And so this is my thing.
Okay, when you say you suggested that I look at something, is it like a specific something in this flower? Yes.
I'm sure that this is pasted somewhere in here.
Okay,
Although
I will find it.
you know, and then
Okay.
but the point.
I wanted to
Go ahead.
to say
No, just one question. I mean,
okay, no, go.
I'm sorry. I just need to understand what Jolie is doing with this image. It's so amazing. I want the same. How do you do that?
It's with I got to use my phone for my camera, and it's with the app that I have to use.
Oh, okay.
It's cool, isn't it? I thought it'd
Yeah.
be fun if Satori's videotaping.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's better. It's better than my normal look.
It's so cool. It's
Very
so
dramatic.
I wanted to tell a story that I told Jolly this, but I wanted to bring it up because it's how I feel about like mines. So like, you know, everybody's all excited. Oh, we're gonna get a liquidity pool. We're gonna have our tokens, and everybody's gonna get paid for their posting. And I was like, yeah, okay. And then I say that like we got this stick that gives us treats, but no one told us that there was a stick to give us treats. A couple of us went over there and found out, okay, you put this thing and you get a couple of treats. Me and Curry Hobo went there and got our treats. We got just enough for us to go back and use our sticks to draw like galaxies and make jokes. But meanwhile, everybody else was using their sticks. Someone went there and got all the treats, left. Everybody figured, oh, we have the stick. And they said, hey, what happened to all our treats? And they started beating each other with their sticks. And then me and Curry Hobo were over there just drawing with our sticks. And then that's like how the reward system on mines actually went. You know, when
exactly.
They,
Exactly. This is beautiful. I have to go.
Okay.
And à bientôt.
Okay. Yeah,
See you
thanks.
on Wednesday.
Yeah, Wednesday. Bye.
See you guys.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.
You know, Satori, that situation to me sounds exactly why you don't get a gaggle full of people together, and then incentivize the behavior of changing ideas.
Yeah.
Right? Because eventually someone is going to lead someone down into the terror hole, and they're going to create that, and then someone else is going to lead everybody else into the victory luck pot, and everybody else in between is going to be like, well, what do we do? I mean, to Durgadas's point, like at some point you have to start incentivizing behavior that makes life that we want to have thrive, and so we got to define that. Like each group that is doing that has to start defining that, and then we also got to figure out that next layer, which I think you're also probably really interested in, Durgadas, is that those layers of that is like, now how do you get those different groups of different value systems to get together in some kind of organized manner? What does that organization look like?
Well,
That's probably starting to shape a little bit more than it did 3 or 4 years ago.
The problem with organizations is, like George Carlin talks about, is, oh, now everybody's got a funny hat. You know, I mean, so the thing that the hat does, right? So if I suddenly am like, see, I've got this Native American design on, so I'm virtue signaling my, you know, the fact that I work in a Native band, and then I claim that like it gives me some special insight when I'm a white guy and I've never suffered from a damn thing. You know what I'm saying? I don't have generational trauma like they do, blah, blah, blah. But the thing is that what you start to do is you start to identify, and your motivations change from being connecting to the overall system, but then rather to connect your allegiance to whatever your group is with their which then identifies you as, you know, whatever it is you are, right? And that's okay. Like when I went to the monastery, we all cut our hair off and we all wore the same clothes. And the whole idea was to break you out of your allegiance to the culture out there and to connect yourself to the culture in here, right? But that was a stepping stone, a way of breaking your ego in so that you could then see the larger nature of reality, right? So there's a way to use that. So here, I'll show you the Cynefin thing, which I talk about a lot. I don't know if you guys have seen me talking about this before, but
How long were you there, Bergadas, in the monastery?
About 5 years.
Nice.
So
good times, were the good years looking back?
yeah, it was life changing. It was there's me before and me after. There's no, you know, there's no. Yeah, there's me before, and then there's me and the rest of the universe after. You know what I'm saying? Like it's not really like me and me, you know. So
Okay, cool.
So my point about this is the way that I don't know if you guys are familiar with Cynefin at all, but the way our typical setup is that we have an entire culture that's built on this. So we're like clear, known, familiar. That's all that's allowed. So if you go to business school, for example, all you're ever going to learn is the clear, known, and familiar, and you're going to assume that everything has got a box that you put it in, and if there's a problem, then there must be a box that already exists that I can stuff something into, right? And then, you know, if I don't know what box or what best practice I'm supposed to follow, and if things not already been automated, you know what I need to do is I need to go get an expert over here in the complicated. It's possible to know it, but I'm not, you have to have training and blah, blah, blah. And those people will come back with a model that'll settle me right down. And then I can have things that are clear, known, or familiar. But what we're doing here is complex. And boy, our culture doesn't know what to do with the complex. We deify them. People like Tesla and oh my God, Elon Musk and oh my God, Bill Gates and oh, those guys once upon a time they had a thing. But for the rest of us, you see, we don't imagine that there's any way backward. So there's the way that we think about things is some incredible person saw in the chaos a certain something and did experiments with his lab coat on it, and he came back from on high with constraints. So us mere mortals can just understand what's going on, and we can create an expertise class of people who did good in school, who can tell us what's best for us, and create and bring back models so that we can run our lives because we're too stupid to understand anything. And let's put robots in charge also, if possible. But the problem is that we've made this tall thing up here so small that we've kicked a bunch of people off of it. There's another version of this that I love, which actually talks about you see how these people we've kicked a shitload of people off of the clear, known, and familiar. This area is getting smaller and smaller all the time, and economically we basically just made this thing into like an ivory tower, you know, with a couple
right there.
Right. And so here we are all falling off, and we're running around with our tails on fire trying to figure out what's going on. And then we're like, okay, now we're sick of that. Let's do this. Well, guess who this is right here? This is Satoshi Nakamoto right here. Because he's like, I'm gonna create some shit for everybody because I'm tired of dealing with this chaos. And he's bringing it back to smart people. Those smart people have created constraints and brought it back up. Now that's great. So my job in the Token Engineering Commons, I feel, is to drag people back from the clear down this ladder into the realm of the expert, back across this thing, and put them back into the complex. Because if you're doing any kind of management function, you should be able to operate both in the complicated and the complex all the time. But the way we usually talk about things in terms of management is in terms of this, right? There's a dividing line between these two things, and that's all there is. Now, my difficulty here is when we go to constrain.
right? Coming out of the complex into constraints. You know what we do? We create governing constraints. Almost 95% of the time in our culture. So then there is no choice. You're trapped in the clear and the complicated because there is no way back. There is no way back counterclockwise here. There's no way to get back. So how do you end up with racism and sexism and all this other shit, systemic crap all over the world? Is all because everything is constrained and everything is a governing constraint. My idea is that we would do something a little bit more complicated like this. This is a graphic that I made because
that's
I
also
wanted.
something I'm looking for.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
That's also something I'm looking for. Experimenting,
Right.
like
Right.
where things can interact and more fluid, and then governance and non-governance can coexist.
Yeah.
Kind
But the
of.
thing is that you don't need governance. You need to know whether you're participating or you're co-creating, and that's all there is.
Yeah.
Governance reverses this entire process and breaks everything.
Yeah.
You don't want to govern anything.
I was just thinking, because what we were talking about, the boundaries, and then what Gene was saying about relationship, that's what it is like there's boundaries of like where you
That's
get
right.
your access to it, and it's because it's based on your relationships with people within
That's right.
the community. Yeah.
Yeah.
Durgadas, maybe could we spend some time, like whenever you're free, like all actually, but I need to give some good foundations, and it's been some while, like I've been in tech, especially for this reason, so people and the world gets the best, so to say, and I kind of feel like landed there, like safe base, like since some weeks and months.
Yeah.
And there are a lot also Satori gonna shape, like if we could give, I think, like
Okay.
instead of products, like so opinionated, how it's gonna function. Reward part was something that communities should come together with, and
Yeah. You know, my idea initially, and I kept on like thinking about it, but I just initially said something about like NFT Redux, and it has to be a mandala, and it was just like a placeholder for me to like think later about it. And it's the initial spark of that. It was like to invert this logic. Like I keep on talking about it. I talked about it with like Krihoba. I asked him, do you feel like you're stuck in this like competing pyramid schemes of like everybody? I feel like I'm getting squashed by everybody's pyramid scheme. And then even my symbol that I use, like it's a standing up pyramid that's smoking weed right there. And I'm like, but the thing about what my idea was about NFT Redux and the Mind Mandala, and initially it starts with the self-discovery game, right? And in the self-discovery game, as you go along, you find out that you can't do self-discovery alone. You have to do it within the group. And so then later, the NFT becomes the Mind Mandala, which is like the group's effort and over time of what they've done, but also too the mandala is like you color in different spaces. Like there's different possibilities of where you contribute, and based on like everything that you do over time, this is like your part of the whole. And then like the things that I've been thinking about is like the soul-bound tasks that Vital talks about, like these things that you do, and they're based on like your effort and your time and skills, and that becomes kind of like, oh, you kind of like prove that you've done this task. Like in the kitchen, like once I worked at a kitchen that was that the chef had a Michelin star, it was a hard kitchen, but once I had that and I told people in the industry, oh, I worked at Hatfields, I got into the door because they knew that kitchen was hard. Mm-hmm. And then the same thing is like, right, if we work at a good DAO that does good stuff, and you have something to show it and say, look, I've done stuff in this DAO, and we do it like this, and this is how we do it. But it shows that you've done stuff in this space. You know how to do like deep work. You know how to do this. You know how to work in the group dynamics, even though that it's like decentralized and it has some complexity. You have to have an understanding that like people have lives, real lives, and people need to take breaks.
Yeah.
And still you work on your part of the task, because like these are all these new hurdles that we're dealing with. Yeah. And like,
see, for me, I would this thing is actually intended to sort of show the process of this. So this stuff in the middle is the frozen stuff in some sense, right? You have to have these three primitives in order for DAO to work. But in and around all of this, there is all this stuff. So you should be rewarded for going through the top part of this process, because you just exist. You showed up, you're here, you're a person, you're a human being, and you're participating with us regardless of whether or not you actually do anything. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, your existence matters, you know. Your existence count.
Exactly. And then you should be rewarded for somebody who is documenting and making sense and processing through this stuff. You should be rewarded for that, right? You should also be rewarded for the thing that we're about. Is you might hear this happen a lot, the do-ocracy. The do-ocracy is only the bottom part of this. Right? We're iterating or evolving. Do you know what I'm saying? So what we tend to reward more is the stuff in the bottom, and not just the participation. Although we're getting, if we're congratulating ourselves or patting ourselves on the back, is that we're also rewarding people to some degree for also participating, right?
Yeah.
The thing is that you can notice that there's actually participation is the systems side of it, and the governing constraints side of it. So what I'm saying is that what we need to do more is to evolve this. The same process can work like this, but if you can do it in the co-creative manner, where you have enabling constraints, where you and allow for entanglements as opposed to these order governing constraints things. So when we're talking about setting up systems, we need to set up systems that have enabling constraint that allows us to go back into the complexity and drink from the well, and even go back into the chaotic again if we wanted to, throw everything out because the current thing that we didn't do, isn't working. And we should have a flexible enough setup where we can realize that there's some things in the middle here that will hold space. So whatever it is that we've created is curated now. We've got tools and information that we've created. You also have to have people who are skilled in moderating, that can hold the space and hold the unique vision and have all that. And those people need to be respected. And you need to respect the people who say yes, and because a key part of leadership is the first follower. If you've got somebody who is holding space for a unique thing, and then, so look up a video called Leadership Lessons from Dancing Guy. You'll see.
I know that one is on. Yeah. It's a TED Talk, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a TED Talk. It's by one of my favorite thinkers, and I read all his books and everything. He's a great guy. So just everyone. So the reason why I kind of came back with this is I was participating in Token Engineering Commons for a long time, and then I went to a space where people were like, hey, I'm the expert in DAOs, and I'm going to say, and I paid money to this person for them to tell me about their expertise in DAOs, and then I realized, oh my God, they're amazing at curation. They seem reasonably good at moderation based on their rules and everything, but then the moment you wanted to do any yes and discussions, the person was like, look, this is my deal. I'm the expert here. You can't be the one, I don't care who's in here. I don't care how talented all of you are. This is my bag, and I'm the one making money out of this. And so I was like, oh my God, this graphic popped into my head. And then and the more I looked at it, the more, so you can see, NVC is here. What's alive in us, right? So in order to be engaged, you have to be, and the moderator has to be good at connecting and engaging people. And they also need to be good at creating safety, right? Between the curated stuff and the moderation. So creation of safety means that person can orient themselves. They can know what they're doing. They can be onboarded, So anyway, I created this thing, and it's lots of, I stopped, I wrote a Word doc about this once, and I stopped after about 18 pages because I was just tired of writing about all of the different things that went into this. But my point about this is that we have to think about things. Oh, by the way, this little infinity symbol is because I was also
looking at the. You guys familiar with Bina Sharma's work on?
Durgas, I'm wondering if you could give me some examples of enabling constraints. I'm lost when you say that. Just a couple quick ones off the top of your head to get me.
Okay, so, I'll give you an example. If you compare Nikola Tesla with Thomas Edison, okay?
Yeah.
Thomas Edison, he was all about creating governing constraints, and he was creative enough to work in the complex.
Yeah, trying to copyright stuff and, you know.
He was creative enough to work in the complex, but he wasn't creative enough to do it without like a brute force approach. You know what I'm saying? Like his whole thing is I get to fail 5,000 times before I actually create this thing. But he was also smart enough to recognize that he had severe limitations in this regard. So he would employ people who were a hell of a lot more creative than he was, and he would employ them and take all of their shit, like Nikola Tesla, who was just a fucking genius, super genius. To this day, people in Silicon Valley will invent something and they'll go to try to get a patent on it and go, oh my God, Nikola Tesla had that 100 years ago. Do you know what I'm saying? That's how smart that guy is. You know what I mean?
Tesla should have gone like freelance, you know, like
Exactly.
instead employed.
But the thing is that right now the whole world would have free electricity if it wasn't for J.P. Morgan, because J.P. Morgan was like, hang on, we have to have a governing constraint, and people need to be able to pay a monthly fee to get access to. I don't want to pay some guy to develop a thing that I could charge money for. So he chopped off Tesla's funding, and that's why all of us don't have free electricity from the ionosphere every minute of every day right now. It's just literally one guy creating a governing constraint and saying, oh, hold on, Tesla, you're too creative and you don't understand that the way that this works. But Thomas Edison knew. That's why he's the father of every goddamn thing. Because he was doing it. So, is that a good example?
I'm wondering if you could just... Oh, shoot. Go for it.
Oh, sorry. I was just unsharing my screen so I could look at you guys.
I think Octopus wanted to say something.
Would you be comfortable with calling governance constraints would you be comfortable with calling governing constraints enforcing constraints?
Yeah, I mean, that's governing and enforcement. Those are all kind of the same thing, right? So
I'm
governance
an
would be
instructor.
both. So, like in every national government, you have a legislative body that deals with the laws, and then you have an enforcement body that, enforces those.
So I work in education, and based on what you're saying, I think of like enabling constraints are things that I put up that are like a foundation. For instance, a rule about, well, like if I give a student a formula, I'm not saying they have to use this formula, it's the only way they can solve it, but it's a structure that might make their process of getting to understanding more efficient. Is that a good example of an enabling constraint, or is it far off from what you mean?
Well, let's put it to you this way. Abstract your job in education, right? So just to, the point of education is to be educated enough to become critical of the education system. And your competence at your ability to critique the thing that you learn from would reveal that the education that you had created an enabling constraint for you. If you are not smart enough to be able to subsequently critique and understand and modify, which is the point, of course, with an enabling constraint, is to go back into the complex, discover new shit, come back with new expertise and new, models and constraints. If it instead restricts your things, instead of it being education, it becomes indoctrination, then what you've done is place a governing constraint on your thing. So in your daily life, I think it's super important that you ask yourself the question, what thing am I doing for these kids, right? And are you getting them to... I'll give you an example. My wife was basically run out of her job as a teacher because she was providing enabling constraints to kids. And they're like, enabling constraints are now abuse. Because the only thing we want in our school system is governing constraints. We only want compliance. Seriously, that actually happened. They just like made things up because how nuts the whole thing is. You don't understand like how in a system which is constructed to only create enabling constraints, violence is now, in a system set up to only do governing constraints, you're considered violent if you give somebody a way back and to their own mind. I was referring to the prophet the other day, or the other moment, and one thing I'll talk to you about is this. I'll give you a comparison. I don't know if I'm answering your question or not, but there's then said a teacher, speak to us of teaching, and he said, no man can reveal to you aught but that which already lies half asleep in the dawning of your knowledge. This is the same exact thing that I was talking about rewarding people. You need to reward people just for existing. You as a teacher, the only thing you're actually doing is you're not giving anybody anything. What you're doing is you're awakening an existing knowledge within the person. The teacher who walks in the shadow of the temple among his followers gives not of his wisdom, but rather of his faith and his lovingness. If he is indeed wise, he does not bid you enter the house of his wisdom, but rather leads you to the threshold of your own mind. The astronomer may speak to you. Go ahead. Do I?
In this context, would you say that governing constraints encourage the right answer and enabling constraints encourage good questions?
That's a really good way of saying it.
That's because I'm
just
just trying to take what you're translating it into things I understand already. So
yeah, no, it's all good.
That jives well with the Tesla Edison analogy too.
What's that?
I feel like that jives well with the Tesla Edison analogy too. I mean, Tesla was just, he had infinite questions, and they led to all
exactly.
That. Edison was always trying to find the answer, and that's really, that's kind of like that gets back to a really interesting distinction between integration and derivation too, right? So that's kind of wow, mind blowing stuff.
Well, that's the what do you call it? Socrates lesson, right? He's like, goes to the Oracle at Delphi and says, "Who's the smartest man?" And you are. He's like, "That can't be." And he goes questioning everybody. And then even to the extent of what he's talking about math in one of the like parables is like, did you teach them or did they retrieve it from their own minds? Because 1 + 1 = 2, and they just mimic until they figure out, oh, I know 10 + 10 is 20, 10 + 11, and they do it themselves. They're retrieving the knowledge from within in it.
Well, that's what I'm trying to point out is that I think that what we miss is in dealing with ourselves as individuals. So there are parts of you that are individuals, and you need to deal with that. But there is another part of you which is common. Okay, and so we need to more validate and reward that which is common over that which is individual. You have to do both, but you have to reward and validate and that enabling constraint is the thing which is like, when I grew up, I had a backyard, and what the first house I ever lived in, we all had backyards, but there was a 10-foot section in between all yards, on both sides and in the back of every yard in my block, that was just for everybody, and all the kids would run around in, and it was all a common space, right? It was like a park, but a park that was just in between all of the houses, right? So everyone had their lot, but then there was this other aspect which was for everyone. And my point about this is that if we're doing reward systems and we forget that everyone should be rewarded across the board just for existing in this situation, and then you also, then we get to recognize you for the different kinds of wealth, right? So if it's also true that in my work as a person who works as a yoga teacher and helps people sort of with spiritual coaching, is that there isn't anything that I can teach you about yourself that isn't already half awakened in there. And the important part is, if I'm saying something that seems wise or changes your mind about something or shifts your consciousness about a thing, the important part is not that I have said it. The important part is your ability to recognize that is in fact wisdom. So we fucked this all up. We really messed this up in terms of where is the priority for that? Should I reward somebody for being wise, or should I reward everyone who's listening for being able to recognize that it is wisdom? Do you follow me? And it seems like we've got we should do both in some sense, right? We should be grateful to the person who is saying the thing, but at the same time, we should be more grateful for the fact that the person had the ability to recognize that was true. And if we're creating reward systems that factor in both sides of that picture, and you can see that I'm trying to explain those two different sides of that. They're not opposites, by the way. I will point out one is not an opposite of the other. One includes the other, right? So there's one thing that includes all of it, and the other that does not. And so you have to recognize that there are both things. And if we're rewarding things in a way that doesn't recognize the fundamental fact of that, then we're making a mistake, according to essentially everything, philosophy, and even physics, So this is, I guess, my point.
I kind of...
And doubly so when you tie governance to it, because now you have incentive to go whatever popular way.
That's right.
Going.
That's right.
I follow you. Hey, so do you have any good? Sorry, go for it, Stuart.
Sorry. I kind of observed like any governance is kind of an attempt to create something so-called like maybe a culture or something that exists beyond those people comes or goes. Well, in governance it's a bit vice versa, like given a consent for governing, but as in, for example, a terminology like mostly called by grassroots movements as well, we call like bottom up or something. That's an acknowledgement, if not recognition, of that very existence of levels, like as if there is a bottom and you're always even living in the opposite side of that thinking, but you're saying that like who is bottom and who is up where, why that pyramid or like vertical hegemony should exist in the first place. If that's a knowledge, then it can be appreciated, but it's not like you gotta enforce something that doesn't fit to time, even now or future,
Yoga psychology, yoga is entirely concerned with psychology, by the way. It has nothing to do with movements. Movements are just was like 1/24 of all of the practices of yoga have to do with movements. But there are only two ways to think. There are unified ways to think, and there are divided ways to think. And it is the combination of these things that, because we have a right brain structure that can't see any differences of any kind. Right now, you're experiencing things in a unified way, but all of your education and everything is all about dividedness, and everything that you learned in schools and everything is all about the external world and how does everything break up. I mean, if you look at the Latin term for
I don't
here
want to
we go.
hijack the silence, but I just want to point
ahead.
out what you're saying resonates with alchemy. The solve and
Mhm.
coagulate, take apart and put back together.
Yeah, well, sure. And there's certain things to be gained by going really deep into the divided stuff. But you'll notice that the going deep into the divided brings you back to the unified, like it did with quantum mechanics. But there are two attitudes you can have toward any one thing. So if I'm teaching about, let's say, Ashtanga yoga, which is the 8 limbs of yoga, most people are going to take that as a mandate, a prescription, a thing that you have to do in order to reach enlightenment. Otherwise, it's not possible. Or you could just say, you know what, that's just the natural unfolding of the spiritual person as they move toward unification. Right? One way is colonized, the other is decolonized and natural. Right? And it's not connected to any particular system. I feel like, I was going to say something about time here. It's really an interesting thing. I was looking this up.
Yeah, time too, especially in this space, is so weird. And
Yeah.
what Jolly was talking about, like that in between space. I was kind of thinking of
Mhm.
playing with it in my own head. Is like hyperspace is that it's like outside of time. Like we're placeholding things, right? I could do like 5 different tasks right now while we're in this meeting. I could drop them into like where my friends work and
Satori,
place them. Yeah.
do you want to do a clap test?
Okay. Let's do this.
Get on camera, buddy. Let's do
Oh,
a clap test. This
I
will be
actually
fun.
don't have a camera on my desktop.
Can you record us then, maybe?
Yeah, I'll record.
All right. So the way this works, guys, on camera, is I'm just gonna hold my hands out and I'm gonna say 1, 2, 3, and when I clap, y'all are gonna clap too. And shit, this might not work because I think only on my end am I gonna see the difference. But this is part of
Yeah,
the experiment. We're about to find
yeah,
out
that's
who
really
can see the
true.
difference of the lag and when. And I don't know how they're doing that. They must be weaving these files, or I don't know, maybe not. I don't know how this is working. You ready?
Okay.
All right. 1, 2, 3, clap. Whoa.
That was like
All right.
5
That was
different
trippy. Did you
Yeah.
guys all get different?
Yeah. It like came in a
It
cascade.
freaked it out.
Yeah. It's
But
cascaded
you
in.
see, the point of this exercise that I've been like, this has been going on in my mind, and a psychologist recently did this to me, right when I was in the middle of my, psychology thing or whatever you want to call it, my shrinking. She said, "All right, let's do a clap test." And right when she said that, I thought disembodied spaces, Satori. I was like, this is a disembodied
Yeah.
space. She's about to tell me what space is between the feeling that she knows I'm having and her next coach, right? Like she's about to coach me through this feeling, and there's this space where I'm over here all alone. And so she was doing a little timing exercise to see how long that space was. And to me, the first thing I think a good way for everybody to picture this is there is no way the Beatles would have been the Beatles if they had to work with that.
Yeah.
And so if we're getting together to form a DAO and to jive and to like throw conversations around, we have to take recognition of that idea that there's this like 2-second lag between what you say and I say, and we're always butting in on each other and saying, okay, I'm sorry. So any feeling we have when we're organizing is going to be a little bit different, and we should just kind of, like I'm saying, if the more we recognize that, I think the more people are going to find creative ways to
That's right.
segue through it.
Well, that goes exactly back to what I'm saying. If we take an attitude toward a thing that is unified, right? If you take an attitude toward the thing that is divided, then you have a totally different way of regarding the thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what I'm trying to say is there is a bifurcation that has to be important. You thinking about things in a unified does not exclude the divided, but thinking about things in a divided way excludes the unified. And that's particularly true of our culture. And what I'm suggesting is that if we're going to call ourselves a DAO, decentralized autonomous, that means that the common has to be the most important aspect of this. It has to be rewarded above all other things, right? And I get that there are people with time and enthusiasm, but time and enthusiasm does not necessarily make you good at your job. Doesn't necessarily make you a steward that should be running a particular group either, right? The
Mhm.
point is that if you have time and enthusiasm, it's like that time and enthusiasm is your reward. What I was saying before about Gibran on giving, right? So if we're talking about that again, see first that you deserve to be a giver and an instrument of giving. For in truth it is life that gives to life, while you who deem yourself a giver are but a witness. So what are we going to talk about in terms of rewards, right? How is it that we're going to work like that?
You're gonna, I think instead of like people are giving or issuing money, issuing is of course, but like circulation, it should be delegated to something else, like connected. But I'm thinking of like maybe faucets of some kind, like not someone and that decides, and that, well, like not the fountains, but like not only fountains, but those taps in the cities in old times. Water was for free, I was thinking, hey, in a city, maybe a couple of places, it can drop like water, and it can mean that you can buy water with that one. At some
like
point,
Nestle.
In this analogy, we had to build creative common wells, right? Like, and then that like propagates a community. Like, here's a good resource of information and stuff that could you guys could grow from.
If you're in Italy riding your bike, you can go into any town there, and there's a water thing. You can fill up your water bottle in every town. It's like there's not a town that doesn't have a freaking well. That's part of the commons, right?
What are those wells made from?
I don't know. I just remember when I was back in my bike racing days.
Brick, follow me here. You're gonna like this.
Okay.
The crypto, the multidisciplinary crypto renaissance man of the future is the stonemason of the past.
Yeah.
Why did they build those fountains?
That's true.
And that crypto commons might look different than brick in a circular square, if you will. But it might actually be more like, hey, where are these? I mean, remember when .coms were crazy? All of a sudden, there were these internet cafes, and the whole point was like most of them people that were running the internet weren't even doing it from their house, and that was because now there's this push to get this diverse set of minds in there, and now there's all this data that pops up where people who were early to the game can start to organize that, and then you got this whole other era that breeds. Well, that's happening right now, and those fountains are kind of creeping up. And what you're asking is what makes that Mason give a darn to go down there and work for that guy when he could just go to the next town and work for the other king, right? What is that makes him stick around there? Well, he probably likes the culture, and that Mason that works there, that's probably something unique that's going on, where there's this greater organization of people who support and know the tools of the trade, right? And like the layers and the hierarchy of the wisdom that comes from that very real world experience and the spiritual like existence that's behind it. So that's already happening everywhere we look in crypto universes. And wouldn't you really, I see a lot of that here at Omega. I mean, I haven't wandered into too many other places because I've been having to keep my blinders on lately. I've been overwhelmed, but I see a lot of that happening where it seems like that's what everybody's starting to identify is the what is the well, what is the water that's there for everybody, but then what are the blocks that is not necessarily there for everybody. People have to put that there and get together and decide what those are, and maybe it's different in every location. Like a block is made up of different stuff everywhere you go, but it's the same general. And
I've got something further in your to advance your metaphor even further, if you'd like.
Yeah, please.
So in
we're running with it, man.
Vedanta, we have this Mithya and Satya, right? Mithya being all of the frames of reference, right? So you could say, what is this river? Well, the river is H2O. The river is the goddess, Ganga. The river is, bound by gravity and certain, features that's carved its way through. You can say a lot of different things about the Ganges River. All of them would be correct. All of them are also only correct inside of their given frame of reference, and that's what Mithya is. And what we do in these various communities is that we basically say this frame of reference above all other frame of references, and instead of being like, we've got to pull ourselves up and out of that and be able to switch frames of reference at any point so that we can keep on the Satya side of the picture. Now, what I'm pointing out is one of the other things that we talk about in non-dual Vedanta is that we actually there's a metaphor, like if you take the unified and the divided, right? I can say the unified is just a clay, all clay everywhere in the world or in the universe, right? And then what I'm going to do with that clay is I'm going to take and make a pot. But if you think about it from a certain perspective, the clay is all there is. There is no pot really. The pot is fashioned from clay, right? And you could break the clay down from that clay pot and make another useful thing out of it. But it is that thing I can continuously, use, because it's, even though I might fashion it into a pot, it's always clay fundamentally. And I think what we have to do is make sure that we're rewarding the fact that clay is existing, or in your metaphor, the brick, and then the brick is then assembled into a well, which is then used for the common good. And what I find is that we tend to stop at, okay, now there are bricks, and then that's it. Or now there's a pot, and that's it. Or now there's do you know what I'm saying? And everyone's really interested in creating the new thing out of the clay, but but no one's actually talking about the clay.
And what's the well? What's the water? What's the butter, my man? What's the butter, Krishna?
Exactly.
Right? What's the essence?
Exactly.
It seems to me it's inspiration, but it's got to be guided inspiration, right?
Yeah, the butter, the ghee, there's a famous section from the Mahabharata that's relevant here. Anyway, I could go on and on. I'm all over the place, but my point about this is that I think that we talk about the commons, but we only talk about the commons of people, right? We don't extend the same courtesy of the commons of people. And frankly, we're one of the only DAOs that does this, dealing with the commons as a thing in token engineering commons. We need to take that commons idea a little bit further than we are, and that's why I'm sort of constantly pushing to make this more interesting. But one of the things I want to do is 3 words in 3 languages in etymology talk a lot about time. So one, exists, right? Comes from the Latin existere, which means to step forth or emerge. But then there's also a thing called liminality, where we're in the divided and we're trying to make the divided more liminal, because we can see that there's more complexity. We can see that there's more unification just outside of the boundary of our awareness, right? And so my job is to be able to show the relationship between the liminality, which is trying to kind of escape and become the unified, and the unified, which has coalesced into like a, maybe the metaphor could be like a cloud which is suddenly rains, And I love that one song. It was a Stevie Nicks that says, "Clouds never expect it when it rains." Well, the unified never expects anything because there's no time. So when it rains, then time starts to exist. And then the word time actually, the root of the word time in the English language comes from the word part, which is to divide or separate. What's also interesting is the Sanskrit word for time is kala, which comes from the verbal root kal, which means count or calculate. And so it's interesting when you just look at first principles, which we often don't in our work, just etymology and really basic stuff. And we miss so much because we've gotten so used to the metaphorical ground substance that we forget that there's a underlying set of principles on which those metaphors are based. And my point about that is that there are some of those metaphors which are already colonized, that are outside of our understanding and exist in the psychological shadow. And I'm all the time trying to pry that open and get people to look inside of that stuff so that we can make systems that end up more correct by every possible measure. and beyond.
So anyway, that's my little sermon for today. Thank you all for coming.
Interesting stuff, man. Thanks for sharing all that.
Thanks for coming.
Good shots. Hey, jump into that board and look at the bottom
Yeah, I
section
did.
there. Will you
Where's
for
the
me?
link?
It should be the last one in the chat, actually. The one right above the
Okay, yeah,
start date.
Figma.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think before.
But what I'm looking for you to do is go down to this little place I've been playing with on the bottom. There's a little collage about the Amazon to the right, but to the left, there's another little Stargate with the circular economy, and it's getting into the way that I've kind of been able to stay home myself is by running a little hydro garden in the basement. And I was doing that probably like 8 years ago, but then when the pandemic hit, well, that became much more important. And my car died, and that got repoed, so I was like leaning in hard, right? Well, I got to this point, and now the more I hear like talk about dynamic energy budget and just generally like systems inside of systems and enlivening the self, the more I see like a lot of the go get 'em attitude in the crypto community seems to have a lot to do with everybody not having the basic needs met. And once you get those basic needs met,
Totally.
do you still want to do you still want to
Totally.
spend 12 hours making some like flashy thing on the computer? Probably not. You probably get off, and you want to do that in real life in some way.
Totally
you know?
true.
Mm-hmm.
Which
But how do you-
speaks
how do you-
exactly to the point I was making before. Not only are we correct in terms of, but we're also correct in terms of motivation and human needs and all this other stuff too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. To
So
re-
a decentralized community has to have a decentralized food store. So even if you're not making your own food, you should be close to somebody who is in case your computer goes down, or else you ain't much of a community very long, are you? I mean, one cut in the wire, and then it's like, I don't even know if Streamer D's eating or if a bomb dropped on him. So forget about pumping hundreds of thousands of dollars into him. You know what I mean? Like if you get people, if you incentivize that bonding and you get people to share what it is that they're short on, I think you're going to find nobody thinks they're short on food. Everybody thinks they're okay with water, and like probably 2% of those people will actually have a water source that they know is good. And that's not any fault of anybody's. It's like it's a fault of the system that we're all trying to leave. Those central power structures that have been abused.
Yeah.
But if we can incentivize people getting together for growing, the other thing I think about, I keep coming up with, is language, man. Like we just spent so much time talking about semantics, and so if we can get a group together that is incentivized to study language together, whatever one you want, make up your own, it would be better than us like, well, basically right now we're in this game where everybody's throwing out lingo and branding, so we're in a restructuring of language as a whole anyway. It would just benefit us all if somehow we could do that. And I got a couple of them ideas, but none of them happens alone.
Well-
man, I'm telling you. As soon as a couple of us get together on any one of these ideas,
Yeah. Well,
breakthroughs happen.
that's what my thinking has been about like some of this stuff is basically kind of piggybacking on this culture and unifying of like a framework in a very subtle way. It's Creative Commons. Like we have to understand what that actually means. There's a deep, rich history of Creative Commons.
Yeah, sorry, I just came back online when I heard somebody say something about Creative Commons.
Yeah.
So I was missing for a minute there.
And so, you know, this helps to like undertie the principle of if you're gonna, that's what my main point of coming here to token engineering the commons is like commons. Oh, I know what that means. Like, yeah, I'm all about the commons. And then like then looking around, be like, oh, we need to be more commons around here.
That's right.
Like we need
That's
to take
totally
that,
true,
we
yeah.
need to take that seriously. And there's power in the Creative Commons, especially for everybody beginning and growing of freely sharing our insights, sharing some of our creativity. So, but like there's a way that we kind of like underpin it, which what you were saying was like the idea behind the NFT wisdom cards is like we each come up with that on our own with our own journey. We share them with people, but over time you can see how like those insights like propagate, and they're really not connected to one person. They're like these things on themselves. And then what like we have that in theory and how we talk, but I think reinforcing it with some of these newer novel things really helps to like solidify that, because we have to we're in for lack of a better word, I remember this one Alan Watts one is like, even though we think we could get out of our culture, we're like enslaved into the culture that we've grown up to. Even
That's true.
Even to the extent like I grew up Catholic and I still have like, you know, framework of Catholic good dreaming. As much as I want to go back to the decolonized version of myself, it's still there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this is a partly done graphic that talks about what I was talking about.
Okay.
That what you're talking about, right? So the metaphor of the pot and the clay could be any number of our crypto technologies, right? But what it also does is talk about dependent origination. So dependent origination is, you know, while the clay is in the form of the pot, it would not be true to say that the pot does not exist. It has some reality, but cannot be described as real according to the definition, which is to say, Advaita defines real as that being which exists in or transcends all three periods of time, past, present, and future. You know, so it is only by only the clay that is real by this definition. So neither is it false, since we can use the water to, you know, to carry water and do various things, and the clay in the form of an amorphous lump is not much use for this purpose. The pot's reality is entirely dependent on the clay, and moreover, it is always clay and nothing but clay, whether it is in the form of the pot or not. Thus, the pot has a dependent reality. There's no English word that used to describe this. The Sanskrit word is mithya. By the way, there's a link that I can send you to. We'll talk about this, but it's also, you know, so what I'm interested in our group is to try to figure out, is there a way to say, yeah, that's a fluid and let's use it in that form. Yeah, that's water, that's chemical made up of two elements. Yeah, you can say all those things and talk about all these things, but we also need to know the thing which connects all of them, and we need to validate and make sure that everything that we do understands that each layer at which we're operating in this DAO has a kind of dependent reality upon the commons. And, you know, it's nice that we have this underpinning called the common stack and all that stuff, but I'm not as sure that people in the commons stack think about the commons beyond anything but a commons of people and or resources, and they don't think of it as foundational to the nature of reality, which is the thing that I'm trying to add to
That's a good
this
point.
picture.
Those are good words for a good point, Duridas.
Anyway, I gotta go, but thanks for hanging in there and talking about all this.
Thanks for stopping in, man.
Yeah, no problem.
Enjoyed all that.
We'll talk soon. Okay.
All right, be good, buddy.
Bye.
What do you think about all that? You too?
Yeah, that's
He's mind blowing, man.
That was the
He
extra.
blows my mind every time I listen to him.
That was the extra little sauce that we needed for today to push a lot of these ideas forward. To get a little meat on the bones.